there. Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm Paula Rizzo. Remote work is A1 on my list. You know, I love it. I love working from home. I love being able to just, set my schedule, do what I can do. And I may or may not be wearing slippers right now, right? That's how it works. These are all the pros of working remotely. But there are some cons, of course, too. There's some challenges, I'll say. Especially if you're a manager, do you know if your staff is actually doing what they should be doing? Or if you're an employee, you want to stand out. You want to make sure that your boss knows, hey, I'm doing just as much as I would if I was in the office. So today we're all going to talk about how to make sure that you set yourself apart and you stand out in a hybrid world. And I have a great expert to introduce you to in just a moment who will help us work through that, because this is the life. This is what we're doing now. Some of you will be in the office, some of you will be remote, or any combination thereof. I have a great freebie for you before we dive in on list making, because I'm a big list maker. Putting this stuff on your list really gets it done. If you go to paularizzo.com/list, you can check out my list making starter kit, and you can grab that there with all kinds of interesting things on how to be more productive, successful, less stressed. I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor, and I have a whole bunch of courses that will help you in all areas of your life, especially hybrid work. And, you can check out that if you go to linkedinlearning.com. But also there's something really exciting that's happening. It's called this learning path that LinkedIn has put together. And my guest today is also on the learning path. She is also one of the LinkedIn learning instructors. Her name is Bianca Lager. And Bianca, I would love to bring you on, say hello, and have you here to chit chat with me a little bit. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Paula. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Appreciate being here. And it's just a joy to speak with my fellow Pathfinder.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a fun idea. So the idea behind it is that, we want to make sure that people are all hooked up when it comes to hybrid world working. You and I have been working in this remote world for quite some time, but it's new to a lot of people.
Totally. Yes, I've run a fully remote company, semi-fully. There's like 3 of us that come into our headquarter office in Santa Barbara sometimes for the past 6 years. And so, when the pandemic hit in 2020 and as everybody kind of made that shift, this was sort of old news already in our world and
Sure.
And things that we've been doing all the time. However, I will say the emergence of more people working remotely and working in now pretty much these hybrid roles has taught me a lot as well about some of the ways I could optimize and be more efficient with my team. So it's been a really interesting journey.
Oh, okay. We'll dive
Always
into
learning.
all of that. I love that. Yeah, exactly. We're all trying to improve, and if you're watching this, leave us questions below in the chat box. We will get to those questions there. So if you have questions about remote working, how to do it better, if you have something that works really great, if you have a tool that you love, leave them in the chat boxes below. Tag a friend who you think might be interested in this. And of course, check out our LinkedIn learning courses for even more information. So let's talk first to the managers. Okay. We'll do a little bit of manager stuff, a little bit of employee. So as a manager, how can you sort of strengthen your relationships with people you might never meet? I mean, I have always had a remote company. I worked in television for years and years, and now I work for myself. And most of the time, I've met most of the people that work with me, but not always. So as a manager, how can you sort of strengthen that?
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this all day long, but I think one of the top things that I always suggest to people, and this is universal, whether you're in person or not, but I think it's often overlooked and extra important when you are remote because of the sort of social distance, if you will, that you have. You really, first and foremost, need to study your team, right? Understand, meet people where they are and who they are and what their personality styles are. Is it more introverted? Is it more extroverted? Understand what makes them thrive in terms of a work style. Also do that for yourself as a manager. That includes you. You are part of the team. So understanding how you work and operate and understanding what your boundaries are. Sometimes we make assumptions in our own head about what works for us. And as a manager, you can assume that that's how everybody else should do it.
Right.
But they don't know that. So things like, for example, do I prefer a Slack versus email, or what types of things do I like on my DMs, versus what should be dropped into my inbox.
Right.
Of course, scheduling, right? Time blocking and scheduling, making those boundaries of when you're available and when you're not. But just kind of what are my work norms, and then being very transparent with your team about what those are. Like, this is my work style. This is what
Yeah.
I prefer. Tell me about yours. So I think having those conversations, opening up with that, and kind of laying the boundaries, and then not letting it go,
Yeah.
like not kind of being like, oh, okay, we did that once at the beginning, but really constantly talking about, because it evolves. Sometimes I
Yeah.
find myself being like, you know what, this actually doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think those
That's
are some
I love
top,
that.
one of the
That's
top things that's super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just like studying your team, studying yourself, knowing I always talk about your
Mhm.
productivity style. I've written about it a
Mhm.
lot, and knowing like how are
Yeah.
you most productive? When are you most productive? As a manager, you can sort of decide that and say, hey, here's when I'm working, here's when I'm not working, here's when I'm, going to be doing meetings, here's when I'm not going to be doing meetings. This is, how it works. As an employee, though, you kind of have
Yeah.
to roll with the punches a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to build those relationships too. It might take a little bit more initiative there. So if you're a team member, what would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. So it's kind of on the other end of that, right? You're asking those questions of your boss, and also understanding when is a good time to talk about the thing I want to talk about, right? Because when you're remote, it's really easy to just, run that through your Teams or your Slack or whatever, and be
Yeah,
like, and be really reactionary. Not just your manager, but your teammates too. They're probably in the middle of something, right?
yeah,
So sometimes the way that you can disrupt their day, and you don't mean to, you're not meaning to, of course, so I think everybody needs to kind of take a beat and understand, is this urgent? How
yeah,
urgent is this? And this is the advice that I give to my teammates. I'm like, Slack me, will you Slack me if it's like something that really needs, it's like, it's urgent, we need to talk about this right now. Also know that if you do Slack me, I might not respond because I'm in the middle of something. So
right.
that expectation that things are going to be kind of right back immediately, can't always be the case if I'm especially if I have a time block, if there's something that I'm
Sure.
in the middle of doing. But I think as an employee, you have to be adaptable to that, and just understand that, there's a human being on the other end of that, and your manager isn't a superhuman. And it's not because they don't care about you, right? I
Right.
think that employees can really take that, and especially for where that's all you got. Sometimes the Slack or that conversation is all you've got, and so you're like, oh my gosh, like they're ignoring me.
Yeah.
Um,
It is
and
about
so
knowing and understanding. Like, I remember that too, like, as a producer for many
yeah.
years, working with, anchors and reporters and people who were very busy and not always,
Yeah.
in the office when we were, managing, and knowing, like, if I send them this email, they'll be in the middle of doing something and they won't see it, they'll ignore it, so I'm gonna send a text later, or I'll call them real quick.
Yeah.
Tone matters a lot too, and I think,
Mhm.
anytime you can leave a voice memo or a video or something that you think like, hey, this might get misconstrued. I want to make sure they get exactly what I mean. I'm not upset about this. It's just that I wish it was
Yeah.
different, or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
I try to do that, whenever possible. But it's interesting
Mhm.
to, knowing people's preferences, but also
Mhm.
over communication. I mean, I
Yeah.
try to do that. I try to say, hey, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to put this here because I'm doing this right now, but like, you don't have to look at it till tomorrow. This is not an urgent thing. What about
Drop
communication,
it in my
tips?
inbox.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, you're so right, and I think that's it. You gotta over communicate. You gotta constantly do it. So certainly the advice isn't like, oh, hold back because they're busy. Understand the appropriate methods to make sure that your communication is coming across in the strongest and best way.
yeah,
So especially with like things that consider a little more thought, that maybe your manager has to think deeply about, and if you are the manager, things that your team needs to think deeply about, email is really good for that, right? It needs
yeah,
a little more elaboration. Should this be an email? Do we need a meeting about this? Like, how do we get this conversation to have the best, possible outcome? Collaboration tools, obviously. I mean, this is now something that people talk about all the time, but
sure.
we're Google Docs kind of peeps over here.
Yeah,
And
same.
so there's everything in the cloud now, but how do you drive conversations to where, what I do a lot is I add a comment to a Google spreadsheet, right? And so we didn't need an email. We didn't need an instant message.
Yeah.
She can comment back when she gets to it. And we're talking directly about that thing we need to work on. We didn't need to set up a meeting. We didn't need to do all this stuff. We actually just dealt with the issue really quickly via comment on Google Docs. And I think that's what over communication is about too, is really utilizing all of your tools, and not just constantly having these disruptive instant messages, but really being focused and really thinking about the best method of that communication, because each issue deserves a
Yeah.
specialized approach usually, so being
It's true.
thoughtful
And
about that.
what are your thoughts on meetings? Because, there's always
Yeah.
been the meeting, like corporate America overdoes it for sure.
Yeah.
They need to get it together. But hopefully this is a way to
Yeah.
sort of like rein in the meetings and say like, hey, not everything has to
Mhm.
be a meeting. You can really just leave a voice memo and the person will know. And if you have to meet about it, sometimes Allie, my producer who's behind the scenes, sometimes she and I we have a meeting every other week or whatever it is. Sometimes we don't need it. Sometimes we're like, we're
Yeah.
good. We went through all the stuff. Or it's like, hey, let's just get on because I want to just talk through this one thing that we keep ignoring looking at. And I just want to, let's look at it together because
Mhm.
otherwise we will continue to ignore it and not do anything about it. Let's look at this, my LinkedIn newsletter or whatever it is so that we
Yeah.
dedicate that time to do it. So what kind of, best practices for meetings do you have?
So this is a really loose rule of thumb. I think that there's something that goes, there's a lot of caveats to it, but I kind of think about it, if it takes me longer than 10 minutes to write an email about it, or if we
Hmm.
need to talk about it longer than 10 minutes, we need a meeting, right?
Oh, good.
And think about that, right? Because sometimes you just need to think deeply about things. And sometimes extroverts, such as myself,
Mhm.
we need to talk to think.
Yeah.
That is my work style. I actually need to talk to get my thoughts out. So you can prepare ahead of time to shorten those meetings by writing them down first, making sure you understand what you need to get out of those things. But yeah, I like the 10-minute rule. I think if you need to kind of have a little bit more back and forth, that's going to take longer than 10 minutes, then hey, we need to dedicate some time to chat about this. And always, 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 what is the goal of the meeting?
Sure.
Document what it is that you talked about and understand what everybody's going to walk away with. It doesn't always happen. It's not perfect, but I do think that the virtual world helps facilitate that a lot better because you basically have all these other collaboration tools that you can lean on. Whereas in an office, if the old school practice was, okay, we need to get together.
Yes.
All these tools, do that for us so we can
Right.
lessen the amount of time that we spend in like, oh my God, I'm going to claw my eyes out on this
Totally.
page.
I've been in those meetings. Yeah, I mean, and it's just much more intentional this way. It's much more like
Yeah.
purposeful and saying like, "Hey, this actually needs to happen. We need to be in the room together to do this. This is the
Yeah.
goal." It makes it much more focused for sure.
Yeah.
The boundaries are an
Mm,
issue because you can work, so you do work, right? And so that
yeah.
there's that. Setting boundaries, I have a whole course on LinkedIn Learning all about how to set
Yes.
boundaries. And
Yes.
so, you can check that out at linkedinlearning.com.
Yes.
But it is difficult, right? Like it's not easy the first time or the second time that you try to create boundaries in a remote world.
Yes.
What are some of the if we're gonna pick, right? I love
Yeah.
rules. So if we're gonna pick a couple of boundaries to start as a starter kit, a boundary starter kit for remote working, what should we put on our list here?
Yeah, I think about it as like the self-care guide, and very much inspired by, I love your courses, Paula, and especially
Thank
the
you.
remote work boundaries, because this is everything. You want to be great at being a remote worker, especially if you're working from home. Okay. There's a difference between working from home and remote work. Sometimes
Yeah.
remote work is you're everywhere. Working from home has a lot of challenges because you're, as we all know, I don't need to elaborate this, the bleeding of the personal life and the work life, of course. So I think that first and foremost, it does start with kind of something we were talking about at the top of the conversation, understanding what your own personal needs are, right? Are you somebody who needs quiet space and time, right?
Yep.
How can you you are the facilities team, I always say, so how can you set your environment up to meet your own needs? and that means communicating with your roommates. I call them my two children, and my husband, or maybe it is actual roommates that you have that maybe they pay rent. To say, hey, create a Google Calendar that you can share with them. I invite my husband to meetings sort of behind the scenes all the time. So he knows, I need this quiet time. You need to keep these children away from me, like whatever it is that we need to do. Those are the types of boundaries that you need. Like if I need to focus for this amount of time, I need to be selective about that. And I need to be able to communicate not just with my team, but with the people that are involved in that remote work life of you. Right now, I'm actually in my office. I have one of our employees here, and for example, I'm like, hey guys, I'm gonna be talking to Paula, so quiet on the set.
Yep.
It's basic stuff, but I think people overlook that stuff because when you're in a work from home or remote environment, you're trying to be part of two worlds at the same time, and you don't. You kind of think you have to accommodate it in ways that you can kind of try to enclose yourself. But if you make them a part of what you're doing and understand, and they have some transparency into what your needs are, it makes the flow much easier. Everybody kind of respect that. And likewise, understanding what those needs are and understanding your own team, if you're the manager and your team members, what their environment and needs are. I think having that full understanding is really good for boundaries and setting, to say, hey, this is what my needs are to be able to be successful here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do that. My husband and I are both working from home, obviously. And so, I'm very much like, hey, here's what I have on the docket this today. I'm going to be on a video call. I'm, shooting this. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And then I'll be out, and then we should go take a walk, and we should go do other things. So you can, incorporate the rest of your life. I mean, I think this is where planning and schedules and list making really does come in play. I very much am a proponent of doing a home list and a work list, and having them, they can be on the same page, but they need to be separate from each other, because, then that gives you a chance to look at one and really focus and say, okay, what am I doing work wise? What am I doing home wise? What has to happen? Because you can throw in a load of laundry in between, your video calls or whatever it is. Like that can happen. I mean, it's part of the beauty of working from home,
Sure.
It's pretty nice, but you want to set up boundaries so that it's like you're not in two worlds all the time. You're not feeling like, hey, I'm kind of here and I'm kind of there. You do need focus time. So it's important to set those boundaries. What about, we're talking about remote work, but what about hybrid? If you're going into the office as well, like, you want to have some mirrored boundaries there too. What do you think?
Yeah, same. And I mean, literally, that's what I'm doing right now. I actually happen to be at the office today. And I think that is your point about to-do lists is very important, and one of my favorite tips as well, because I can, when people are like, what's your most, top tip of remote work? A virtual to-do list. Digitize your to-do list. It is so important. I mean, I don't even know where it is. I'm still like kind of like an old school. I won't let go of my notebook, but like I've started to forget it here and there, because I absolutely have leaned on the virtual to-do list, and I do use two separate apps for my work life and my home life.
What do you use?
I use Google Tasks for my work life, because we use the G Suite. So all of that is, you can integrate it in your calendar. It's right there in my Gmail, right? It's next. I see it all day long.
Yep.
You can organize it. Some of the top features I like is you can organize it by folders. So for me, it's like the departments of my company. What does marketing need? What does, finance need? And then you can make subtasks, so you can sort of have some project management, but it's a very simple tool. And I'm a pretty big fan of simple tools like that. When it comes to just kind of your day-to-day, like, optimization of productivity, which you're a master on. For my home life, I use something called To Do Cloud.
I don't know this one.
Yeah. So my husband and I've actually, it's funny. He had like a different version of the app. And I'm like, why does yours look different? And so I emailed the company, and turns out I've been using this app since 2015. And they were like, whoa, like
super user.
You're old school. We have a new version. Here you go, kind of a thing. But I was like, oh, okay, great. But but it worked for me, so it didn't really matter. But I had we can collaborate on that. We can share lists, grocery lists. Those
Yeah.
are great things. And look, the reasons why you need that so much is because you are jumping from the office. Personally, now airports again for me.
Yeah.
And so I can't lug this notebook around, and I
Totally.
need to constantly be able to reference this thing. I need to be able to make sure that that my thoughts are even jot. It's where I jot down my thoughts sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
I have like a whole folder that I'm just things that I am like, ooh, that's a good idea. So that collaboration and any kind of transparency into it.
Mhm.
So I mean, again, the collaboration piece, but when you're a manager, these are things you can delegate possibly.
Yeah.
These are at least things agenda meet that you're going to talk about later. So, having that in a digital space where you can be in the office and access that, be at home, be at an airport, be wherever you are. If you do nothing else, do that.
Yeah.
If you're a
I love
remote
it.
worker.
And I really love that you have 2 separate places for your 2 types of life, because it really is
Yeah.
important to have a focus here and not to have them all
Hmm.
jumbled together, because otherwise you don't know what to look at, you're not sure what to do, like, "Who am I today? Where am
Hmm.
I going? Is today Saturday? What am I?"
Yeah.
It just like, you really need
100%.
to know, right, like, the difference there. So this is really great. I'm glad that we dove in a little bit on lists and home and things like that, because it is
Yeah.
really important. It's important for everyone to figure out this for themselves too. Like, you and I could sit here all day
Yeah.
every day and say, like, this is what works for us. This is how we do it. This is how I like to set it up. And I've done
Yeah.
many, many talks where people say, "What pen do you use? What notebook do you use?" And I'm always like, "It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter." It
Just
really, really
examples.
doesn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
It's
you
just
have to see what
examples, right?
works. We have to try
Yeah,
it.
and what a time to be alive, right, Paula? There's so many companies that have so many different versions of these things. So test it out, try it. Like I've tried, I like these things. I've tried so many other ones. Evernote, for example, it's a
Yep.
great tool. It doesn't really work for me, but I still really appreciate the features and like just the elaborateness of how you can capture information on the internet and kind of keep it all together.
Yep.
But yeah, for me to feel less overwhelmed, like I need something more simple. And that's the thing. You have to experiment. You have to innovate in your own life.
Yeah, and use
And yeah,
different things for different purposes. Same for me with
totally.
Evernote. It's like there's too much, and I wrote about this many, many years ago. Because
Oh,
I was like, I
really?
don't get it. Like, why does everybody love Evernote so much? I just like I'm overwhelmed by all the things that it can do. But now
Yeah.
I use it very purposefully. I use it when I'm planning
Mm.
trips, and I have my packing lists in there.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That is where I keep it, because then I have
Yeah.
this ongoing I have like a template there of my packing list, so I can add
Yep.
to it, I can change it up, and then for each trip I put like what's my itinerary, so I write that out there, and so I know
Yep.
that's where my travel stuff goes. And then,
That's a
I
great
clip
idea.
things from the internet. If I see like a cool gift idea, I'll
Yeah.
flip it and put it in that notebook, and that's where they are. That's what's in Evernote for me for right now. So, like,
Super
having
brilliant.
yeah, like, compartmentalizing
Yeah.
in your mind, like, I know like, where
Hmm.
you're gonna put your keys, you
Yeah.
can find them here. It's the same thing for me. It's like, "Oh, I'll find that in that app," right?
Totally.
So, trying those
Hmm.
things out, I always say give yourself 2 weeks. Try it out. If
Yeah.
it works for you, if
Hmm.
not, you can abandon it, delete it off your phone. It's
Yeah.
okay to let it go,
Yeah.
and that's that. But yeah, anyone who's watching, if you have tool ideas or things that have worked for you, leave it in the comments
Hmm.
below. We'll check that out for sure. And Bianca, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being here and
Yeah,
giving us all your
absolutely.
great tips. It's been wonderful. Um, and I want to encourage everyone to check out your course on linkedinlearning.com. Of course, there it is, how to stand out remotely and in a hybrid world. You can check that out along with my courses as well that are all there. So Bianca, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paula. I really appreciate it. Thanks
Of
everyone for watching.
of course. And of course, you can, of course, those lists are important. I'm not going to stop talking about it. So I want you to go get my list making starter kit. If you go to paularizzo.com/list, you can check it out there and leave us some notes and messages in the comments below. And we will see you next time. Thanks for being here.